Good morning. Oh, afternoon already, actually. Uh, so I consider myself very lucky because I'm a linguist. And the subject of my research, language, is an amazing organism, which is almost never the same in any one period of time. And so it's extremely interesting for me to research the changes that are happening in language. And I think it's obvious that over the last year, there have been a lot of changes in our reality, in our environment, and language obviously reflected these changes. That's how I came to research this topic of what new words have appeared in our language over the last year. And so which footprint has this extreme situation of the pandemic left on English, the language which I'm researching. And there have been a lot of studies about this over the year when 2020 finished, because as you know, many dictionaries and many language portals compile a sort of lists of word of the year. So I studied some of these lists, and I studied some of the examples of the new coinages and some new word combinations that were used over the year. And it became clear that, in fact, there were three main areas how the language changed in this. And of course, probably the most striking difference is the creation of some new words. Nevertheless, the language has also changed in the sense that some words that were previously used only by specialists came into general usage, and also that many words have developed some new specific to our reality meanings. So I would like to start with the old words that were revisited. And the first is obviously the word coronavirus. We may think it's something completely new, but in fact, the word was coined, the specific term was coined in the 60s when the family of these viruses was discovered. But nevertheless, this, according to the research of the Oxford languages, the foundation that compiles the Oxford Dictionary of English, the use of the word coronavirus, the frequency of the use of this word over the last year has increased tremendously for obvious reasons. And so we can, apart from just designating a specific family of viruses, it came to mean this specific virus which has caused the recent pandemic. And so this allowed the Oxford Dictionary to set it out as a kind of a separate new meaning of the word. And also, we can see here on this graph from the Oxford languages that the occurrence of this word spiked in March 2020, and despite the fact that later it was overtaken by another word to designate this specific virus, it's still much higher than it used to be before 2020. So another old word revisited was quarantine. Quarantine is actually a very interesting word because, again, some of us may know that it comes from Venetian, where it was first documented back in the 14th century. It came into use in English in the 15th century. But in a kind of a different meaning. You see, it used to mean the desert in which Christ fasted for 40 days, the period of 40 days in which a widow has the right to remain in her dead husband's home. So the idea of 40 was central there. And only after the Great London Plague in the 17th century, in English, it became used in the modern sense. But again, so the word has already existed in the language, but not much in use. You can see that on Google, there are about 265 million documents with the word quarantine. but the half of them relates to 2020. So we have seen a sort of a resurrection of this word, which was almost forgotten. Another interesting aspect of how some old-time words became again topical, we can see it on the example of wartime metaphors. Unfortunately, the first wave of the pandemic has hit very hard in many countries and in Britain, of course. So that's it was not surprising that there were a lot of metaphors and words that are related to the wartime used in that period. So we could see some headlines in the newspapers which spoke about the frontline workers, very especially common word combination. So the doctors were referred to as army of kind hearts, army of angels. So lots of expressions that were previously documented mainly in the context of World War I, World War II came into use again. To the extent even that although these usages were understandable, but many of those who these words referred to, like medical workers or essential workers, they even got frustrated by such uses, being constantly referred to as heroes, but at the same time lacking some PPE and everything, caused movement on the internet where they asked to refrain from using wartime metaphors. So even to the extent that we see this worker saying that we were reduced from heroes to zeros, with a special spelling. So, but this was another feature of the language when again some older elements became once again topical. Another aspect, of course, that the new reality asked us to develop new meanings to the already existing words. So there were lots of words that acquired some specialized meaning in the context of the pandemic. Here you can see some of the examples from the Cambridge Dictionary, its online version, and from the coronavirus corpus, which is a very interesting resource compiled during 2020, which collects all the documents related to all the documents from the news, from the internet news related to the pandemic, and analyzes the language and the occurrence of word combinations and words in this. So you can see here, for example, the word shielding. Again, the word itself is nothing new, coming from shield. Yeah, it was already in use in the in football. Where shielding means a special position of a player when they put their body between the ball and the goalkeeper in order to in order for the opponent not to score the goal. But now, in the 2020, the word shielding was used in a completely different sense. We can see from this example from the Cambridge Dictionary, I think it is. So where it says shielding, it's basically like hiding in place or staying somewhere away in order not to contract the virus. The word curve. Of course, we all know that curve may mean a line on a graph. But again, in the context of the pandemic, the curve that was mostly spoken about was the number of patients in hospitals. So the word combination flattened the curve started to refer specifically to some measures in order to avoid the spike in patients in hospitals. And the Cambridge Dictionary decided that it deserved a special meaning, the special new meaning for the word curve, and they've included it in their dictionary. Well, there were other words that also slightly changed or had their meaning specified in the context of the pandemic. Lockdown, yes, not only English speakers, but Russian speakers and speakers of many other languages nowadays understand what lockdown is. But again, the word is not new. Starting from the 19th century, it was used in a sense of, let me quote, it was used in the meaning of to restrict access to a place because of some danger, as a verb to lock down and subsequently restricted access. But again, nowadays, when we speak about lockdown without any specification, we probably all understand that it is the specific measures by the government to contain the spread of a disease. So as you may know, Collins' Dictionary of English even decided that lockdown deserved to be called the word of the year 2020. Bubble, another interesting example, yeah, because from very direct meaning, it came to mean a group of people who have no access, who have contact within each other, but no contact with other groups. And again, as a measure of restricting contagion. And so this word bubble became especially used in British English. Interestingly, in American English, they prefer to use the word pod. And so pod became a word of choice for the Americans in the same meaning as this restricted group of people. So you see, all these words, they develop new meanings. And nowadays, when we speak about support bubble, as in this example from the news, most people will understand that it has nothing to do with this, you know, for say, water bubble, for example. Okay, so the repurposing of the existing words was one of the features of the changes in language, but of course, probably the most amazing ones are the new creations that the pandemic speak, or the coronavirus speak, as it is sometimes referred to on the news, has developed. Here you can see some of the examples of such new coinages. And obviously, lots of them come from the stem coronavirus or COVID itself. If this pandemic, if nothing, this pandemic has proven one thing. People, in all circumstances, people are able to be creative with the language. So, for instance, I absolutely love this. Corona babies, quarantines, you see, so, or for example, COVID divorce, a divorce caused by people who lived together in the lockdown. Coronageddon, coronavirus plus Armageddon. So it's when the end of the world was predicted because of the coronavirus. So, and lots of others. These are just some of the examples. Also, the words that were created from these stems could refer not only to these blends, but you could see examples of pre-post-COVID. Yeah, so when COVID was used as like referring to time, the year BC. Yeah, you think it's before Christ? No, it's before coronavirus. Covidio party, Corona apocalypse, and many others. So these are some of the examples. It's a sure sign that the word has become embedded in the language when it gets its own abbreviations, changes, and when people start making creative use of it. So with one more creative change that the word coronavirus has experienced happened in Australian English initially, but now thanks to the internet, thanks to globalization, lots of people all over the world already understand it. So corona was shortened for Rona. Yeah, it's common for Australian English to use shorter forms of the word. And for example, in March 2021, when many countries celebrated the sad anniversary of the first lockdowns, you could see a hashtag on the media, on the social media, in YouTube, like "Happy Roniversary" or something like this. So. Australian English actually brought about some more examples of creative usage. For example, sanitizer was shortened to sani. Quarantine actually became quaz. It's from quarantine, and the name of, sometimes Australia is referred to as the land of Oz. Yeah, so it became quaz, quarantine in Australia. So some of the examples of Australian English coronavirus speak. Well, you have probably noticed that many of those creative usages are examples of blending. Blending in itself, again, it's nothing new. That's probably one of the most common ways of creating new words in English today. And blending, though it's not very old phenomenon too, researchers think that mostly the first blends are attributed to Lewis Carroll. It's so unlike compounding, when the words are combined together on the basis of morphemes, when it comes to blending, the sound is much more important. So people combine two words together based on how they sound, whether they fit each other in terms of sound. So Lewis Carroll did a lot of those in his little poems, which he included in Alice in Wonderland. And so journalists were especially eager to create such blends ever since. So the coronavirus speak has also given us some interesting blends. For example, infodemic, which is the epidemic of information, mostly negative information. Yeah, doom scrolling. It's when you spend a lot of time behind the screen, behind the computer, looking for negative news. So obviously from doom and scrolling the screen. Blur's day, an indefinite day of the week during lockdown. Yeah. Zoom bombing. So again, some of the examples here, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's when pranksters interrupt meetings on Zoom with offensive material. These are just some of the examples. Actually, you can find lots of others if you look, as I previously said, if you look at this coronavirus corpus, which combines lots of it, or I can refer you to the Oxford Languages report on the year 2020, which also gives lots of very creative examples of blends. Well, one more aspect that we should say about of the changes that occurred is that some collocations, not just new words, but new collocations for the already known words appeared. For example, if you look at these pictures, you can probably recognize phrases like this first one is social distancing. Yeah, again, the word itself themselves existed in it, but in this collocation, social distancing, they became extremely relevant over the year. The picture left below is, can you guess? What are they doing? Greet each other, but what is the specific type of greeting called nowadays? Elbow bump, elbow bump. Yeah. A person lying with a laptop on the beach is a digital nomad. Nowadays, with the help of technology, we can work anywhere, or we can move around the world. So such people who don't live in one specific place and continue working in one specific company, for example, or place of work, can be called digital nomads, and they became extremely relevant during the pandemic. And finally, can you guess what is happening in the last picture? Because of it could be homeschooling, yeah, but this particular, it refers to the man himself. He is working from home, yeah? So working from home became a very popular phrase, even to the extent that it is now used simply as an acronym. WHF WFH, and even it is sometimes used as a verb, to WFH. So he is WFHing. Oh. So also, an interesting phenomenon is that the frequency of some collocations has changed mostly. For example, these data from the Oxford Languages Report suggests that before 2020, the most common word combination with the word remote was, for example, remote village, remote island, but the number of texts that now use it in combination with remote learning or working or workforce is much, much higher nowadays. And the same has happened, for example, to the word Zoom. Again, before 2020, when you heard of Zoom, you probably thought about some optics, about cameras. Nowadays, of course, this is this digital tool that we are using now. Yeah. So the frequency of collocations has changed. Well, and as a conclusion, I would like to say that there is no denial that the lifestyle of many people has changed tremendously over this last year, and these changes were to be reflected in the language. But I find these changes sort of reassuring, because if we look at it, not much has changed. I mean, languages have always responded to some challenges with coming up with new vocabulary, blending has been one of the most popular methods of word formation in English well before the pandemic. And new creative words were being coined almost always. So it is this stability that I find reassuring, because I think it gives us hope that this too shall pass. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, then just like to say once again that if you are interested in this kind of new word formations, I refer you to this Oxford Languages Report, which is extremely detailed, and it shows you the frequency of all different types of new word combinations of words occurring, and also to the coronavirus corpus, which you can find as part of the resource, the English Corpora, on the internet. Thank you.